Lights pull in behind your car in your own driveway, and the officer opens with a line that sounds almost apologetic. "Hey, sorry to bother you. We got a call about this address." Or maybe it's a call about your vehicle, your license plate, some vague activity in the area. Most people's guard drops the second they hear that phrase. It sounds passive, almost like the officer is just doing paperwork, just checking a box because someone else reported something. That framing is exactly why it works so well, and it's also exactly why it deserves a much closer look than most people give it in the moment. "We got a call" isn't a magic phrase that grants police unlimited authority to search, question, or enter. It's the start of a specific legal analysis. What kind of call? How reliable? What does it actually justify? And knowing that analysis changes how you should respond, calmly and correctly, the moment you hear it. I'm going to walk through exactly what this phrase legally means, what it does and doesn't authorize, and precisely what to say depending on whether you're at your front door, in your car, or anywhere in between. Before I get into it, subscribe now, because this is one of the most common openings officers use precisely because it works on people who don't know what's actually behind it. And I want you to be the exception. Why this phrase works so well on people. "We got a call" does something specific psychologically. It reframes the officer as a neutral messenger rather than an investigator building a case. It suggests the interaction is routine, low stakes, almost a formality, and it invites you to cooperate quickly just to clear the misunderstanding and move on with your evening. None of that framing is necessarily dishonest. Sometimes it genuinely is just a routine welfare check or noise complaint. But the framing itself doesn't tell you what your actual legal position is. And that's the piece worth understanding before you respond to anything else. The honest legal reality is that a call, tip, or report is simply the starting point of an analysis, not an automatic grant of authority. Courts have spent decades working out exactly how much a report from someone else, a neighbor, an anonymous caller, a dispatcher relaying secondhand information, can justify on its own, and the answer depends heavily on the specifics. How reliable the information is, how detailed it is, whether it predicts something the officer was later able to confirm, and what kind of call it actually was. The legal framework behind "We got a call." In Terry v. Ohio, 1968, the baseline standard for any brief investigative stop was set. An officer needs reasonable, articulable suspicion that a crime is occurring or has occurred. A report from someone else can absolutely contribute to that suspicion, but not automatically or without limit. In Florida v. JL, 2000, the Supreme Court addressed anonymous tips directly, and the ruling matters a great deal here. The court held that a bare anonymous tip, someone calls in, describes a person, claims they're armed, with no other corroborating detail, is not, by itself, enough to justify a stop and frisk. The tip needs some indicium of reliability, something beyond just an unverified claim, before it can justify police action on its own. Later, in Navarrete v. California **, 2014, the court reached a different outcome on a specific set of facts, upholding a stop based on an anonymous 911 call reporting a specific vehicle that had run another car off the road. The distinguishing factor was that the call contained detailed, verifiable, predictive information, a specific vehicle, a specific location, a specific dangerous act, the kind of detail that suggested the caller had actually witnessed what they were describing, rather than a vague, unverifiable claim. Put those two cases together, and you get the actual rule worth understanding. Not all calls carry the same legal weight. A vague, generic report carries very little on its own. A detailed, specific, corroborated report can carry real weight, sometimes enough to justify a stop by itself. The phrase "we got a call" tells you almost nothing about which category you're actually dealing with. And that's exactly the gap the right questions are designed to close. This distinction plays out constantly in real encounters, and it's worth internalizing rather than treating as an abstract legal rule. A caller who says "there's a suspicious car on my street" is describing almost nothing verifiable. A caller who says "a blue pickup truck just backed into a parked car on 5th Street and drove off without stopping" is describing something specific, time-stamped, and checkable against what an officer actually finds. Officers know this distinction too, even if they don't always explain it up front, which is exactly why the clarifying question matters. It's not about catching anyone in a lie. It's about understanding which version of a call you're actually dealing with, since the practical and legal significance of each is genuinely different. What to say during a vehicle stop triggered by a call. If you're pulled over and the stated reason is a call rather than something the officer personally observed, a calm, direct question is entirely appropriate. Officer, can you tell me what specifically the call described? This isn't confrontational. It's a completely reasonable clarifying question, and how it gets answered tells you a great deal. If the answer is specific, a caller described your exact vehicle, your plate, a specific location, a specific described action. That's the kind of detail that can genuinely support a stop under the Navarrete framework. If the answer is vague, someone called about a car matching this description in the area with no further detail. That's closer to the kind of bare, uncorroborated tip that Florida v. JL found insufficient on its own, and it's worth knowing that distinction exists, even if arguing it roadside isn't the productive move. Either way, your practical response stays the same regardless of which category the call falls into. Comply with lawful instructions, provide your license and registration when asked, and decline to volunteer information beyond what's required. You can say, I understand there was a call. I'm going to comply with your instructions, but I'd like to know specifically what I'm being stopped for, and I'm not going to answer questions beyond that. This creates a clear, calm record of exactly what was communicated and how you responded to it, which matters far more later than anything you'd accomplish by arguing the legal standard on the shoulder of the road. It helps to see how this actually plays out. Officer walks up and says, we got a call about a vehicle matching this description driving erratically in the area. You respond, I understand. Can you tell me specifically what the caller described and where? If the officer says, a silver sedan swerving near the intersection back there, about 10 minutes ago, that's specific, and it's the kind of detail that can genuinely support the stop. If instead the answer is something closer to just a car matching this general description in the neighborhood, that's a much thinner basis. And knowing the difference changes nothing about how you should behave in the moment, but it matters enormously if the stop is ever reviewed afterward by an attorney. It's also worth understanding why officers sometimes lean on, we got a call, even when they've personally observed something themselves. Citing a call can feel like a softer, less confrontational way to open an interaction than saying, I watched you do something. And some officers use it as a conversational icebreaker regardless of how much weight the call actually carries in the underlying legal justification for the stop. This doesn't make the phrase dishonest, but it does mean you shouldn't assume the call is the entire legal basis just because it's the first thing mentioned. Asking the clarifying question is what actually tells you what's really behind the stop. The front door scenario is different, and it matters more. A knock at your door is a fundamentally different legal situation than a traffic stop because your home carries the highest level of Fourth Amendment protection that exists. Officers can knock on your door and ask to speak with you. This is sometimes called a knock and talk, and doing so doesn't require any particular level of suspicion at all because you're not obligated to open the door or answer questions just because someone knocked. What it does not automatically authorize is entry into your home. If officers arrive saying, we got a call about your address, a welfare check, a noise complaint, a domestic disturbance report, anything, the critical distinction is between them talking to you at the doorway versus them coming inside. You can speak with officers at your door without stepping back or opening it further, and you're not required to invite them in simply because they've explained why they're there. A calm, clear way to handle this. Open the door partially or step outside and close it behind you rather than leaving it wide open, and say something like, I appreciate you letting me know. I'm fine. Everything's okay here. I'm not going to invite you inside, but I'm happy to answer that specific question. If they push further, you can add, do you have a warrant to enter? If the answer is no, you can say, calmly, then I'm not consenting to entry, but I'm glad to speak with you right here. This isn't hostile. It's a completely lawful, calm assertion of a real constitutional protection, and officers handling routine welfare checks or noise complaints generally expect and accept this kind of response without escalation. There's an important exception worth understanding honestly. If officers have an independent, good faith basis to believe someone inside is in immediate danger, genuinely believable signs of an emergency, not just a vague call, Courts have recognized what's sometimes called the community caretaking or emergency aid exception, allowing entry without a warrant in truly urgent circumstances. This exception is meant to be narrow, tied to a specific belief that someone's safety is at risk right now, not a general excuse to enter based solely on the existence of a call. If officers assert this exception and enter despite your objection, the correct move in that moment is not physical resistance. It's a clear, calm verbal objection stated once. I do not consent to this entry. That statement preserves the issue for later review by an attorney, without turning a legal dispute into a physical one. Here's roughly how this exchange tends to unfold at a doorway. An officer knocks and says, "We got a call about some noise coming from this address. Everything okay?" You can respond, "Everything's fine. Thanks for checking." If the officer follows with, "Mind if I just take a quick look inside to confirm?" The calm, complete response is, "I appreciate you checking on us, but I'm not going to invite you in. Do you have a warrant?" If the answer is no, and there's no specific emergency being described, you can add, "Then I'm not consenting to entry, but I'm happy to keep talking right here." Most officers, faced with a calm, clear boundary like this on a routine call, simply note it and move on. The tone throughout stays cooperative. You're answering the actual safety question honestly. You're just drawing a clear line around your threshold. The welfare check specifically. Welfare checks deserve their own explanation because they come up constantly and they're handled a little differently than other "we got a call" situations. If someone reports concern for your safety or the safety of someone in your home, officers are generally allowed to make contact and ask enough to satisfy themselves that everyone is genuinely okay. This is a legitimate, common, and usually well-intentioned type of call. The clean way to handle a welfare check is straightforward honesty paired with the same boundary about entry. Confirm you're safe. Answer the specific safety-related question directly, and you can decline a walkthrough of your home if officers ask for one without a warrant or without a specific, articulated emergency. Something like, "I'm fine, thank you for checking. I don't need anything, and I'm not going to invite you in, but I appreciate you following up." Most welfare checks end cleanly right there. If an officer pushes to enter anyway without a stated emergency or a warrant, that's the moment for the same calm, clear objection covered above. It's worth understanding why welfare checks sometimes escalate, even when everything is genuinely fine. Officers conducting a welfare check are often working from secondhand, sometimes incomplete information. A neighbor who hasn't seen you in a few days, a family member who couldn't reach you by phone, a coworker who noticed you missed something unusual. From the officer's side, a calm verbal confirmation that everything's fine, without visual confirmation, doesn't always fully resolve their concern, which is part of why some officers will ask to see you clearly or ask to speak with everyone in the household, even while still respecting a decision not to allow entry. Answering clearly, showing your face at the door, and confirming who else is present, if asked, usually satisfies this concern without requiring you to allow anyone inside. The goal on both sides is genuinely the same one, confirming everyone's safety, even though the boundary around entry can still be maintained the entire time. When the call itself is the problem, there's a version of this situation worth addressing directly, because it's become more common and it deserves its own explanation. Sometimes a call to police is made maliciously, or based on nothing more than someone's discomfort with a person's presence, race, or behavior that isn't actually unlawful. This has become widely known enough that it has an informal name in public conversation, but legally, the analysis doesn't change based on the caller's motive. What matters is still whether the officer, upon arriving, can articulate reasonable suspicion or probable cause based on what they personally observe, independent of the caller's possible bias or bad intent. If you find yourself on the receiving end of a call that seems baseless or motivated by something other than an actual legal concern, the same calm framework still applies. Ask what the call specifically described, comply with lawful instructions, and decline to volunteer more than necessary. You're not obligated to defend yourself against the substance of someone else's complaint or explain your presence somewhere you're lawfully allowed to be, beyond what's legally required in that state during that specific type of encounter. If the encounter ends without any independent finding of wrongdoing, that's worth documenting afterward, noting the time, what was said, and the outcome, both for your own record And in case the pattern of calls against you becomes something worth addressing separately, whether through the officer's own documentation practices or, in some jurisdictions, through avenues specifically created to address abusive or discriminatory reporting. What not to do when you hear, "We got a call." Don't assume the phrase alone means you're required to answer every question or allow entry. It doesn't, on its own. Don't get defensive or demand to know who called, since officers generally won't disclose that, and pushing on it tends to escalate the tone of the interaction without accomplishing anything useful. Don't lie about your situation, your identity, or what's going on. False statements to officers can create separate legal exposure that has nothing to do with whatever the original call was about. And don't physically block a doorway or vehicle in a way that could be read as obstruction. The goal is always a calm verbal boundary, not a physical one. The short version, "We got a call," is the start of a conversation, not the end of one. In a vehicle, ask what the call specifically described, comply with lawful instructions, and limit what you volunteer beyond that. At your door, you're not required to let anyone inside just because a call was made. You can speak at the doorway, decline entry without a warrant, and still be completely calm and cooperative about it. During a welfare check, honest reassurance usually resolves things quickly, and you can still decline entry to your home unless there's a genuine, specific emergency or a warrant. And in every version of this, a clear, calm verbal objection, "I don't consent to entry," or "I'd like to know specifically what this call described," is the tool that actually protects your position, not raised voices or physical resistance. If this changed how you'd respond the next time you hear those exact words, that's exactly why I put these together. Subscribe now, so you've already got this in your head before it happens. Hit like so more people learn the difference between a routine call and an actual legal basis for entry or a stop. And drop a comment with the specific scenario: traffic stop, front door, welfare check, you want broken down further. This is general legal education, not legal advice for your specific situation. How courts treat tips, calls, and welfare checks varies by state and by the specific facts involved, and the emergency aid exception in particular is heavily fact-dependent. If you're dealing with an actual situation involving police contact at your home or vehicle, the right step is speaking with a licensed attorney in your state who can evaluate the specific facts, not general guidance from a video. Know the difference between a knock and an entry. Know the difference between a question and a demand. Stay calm, stay clear, and make them be specific.